Let's bring in Republican strategist Matt Klink. Matt, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
A lot of news to talk about. With the announcement of the strait now closed again, the U.S. launching a new round of strikes again. What's your reaction? What do you see happening next?
I hate to say it, but I feel like I'm being forced to watch the same double feature over and over and over again. I mean, look, at a certain point, I think that we have to realize that the Iranians are not good negotiators, meaning that you can't believe a word that they say. That the U.S. just needs to, unfortunately, pound them militarily into submission. And look, I know that some of my Democratic friends have said we should have never done this in the first place. Imagine trying to do this if Iran has a nuclear weapon. So either we do it now when they don't have a nuclear weapon, or we do it later when they do, and the stakes go up radically. I don't like it. I don't like risking American men and women in a far-off land, but I don't think, unfortunately, at this point, we have a choice.
We heard from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth pretty immediately after the news was announced. He took to social media. He said Iran made a poor choice. Now they pay. Your reaction to the Secretary of War?
Look, it's statements like that may make some people feel really good, but ultimately, as the general said, there's an information war. The IRGC is responding as well. For their domestic consumption, they're fighting the great Satan, the ultimate evil. So again, our goal should be to target the parts of Iran and their infrastructure that makes their willingness and their ability to fight go away. And if it drives them back to the negotiating table, great. But at a certain point, we can't stop this until they're so beaten down that they can't do this anymore. Negotiations are not working.
What about what the lieutenant general said about Iran now becoming a superpower because of this very conflict?
I think that he's saying that in the sense that they have the ability to shut off a waterway through which 20% of the world's oil passes. Clearly, right. They don't have the ability to project power beyond their border. And I think that goes back to my point, though, is that imagine if Iran did this with a nuclear weapon in their back pocket. Then the stakes just have raised exponentially. And then we do have to bow to Iranian blackmail, or they frankly start nuking parts of the world that we don't want nuked. So, I mean, again, there are a series of bad options here. None of them are good. And unfortunately, Donald Trump did pick this battle, but I think he picked it at the right time when Iran was at its weakest.
A moment ago, you and I were talking about the Secretary of War's rhetoric when it comes to an assassination attempt by Iran on President Trump. The president is not backing down when it comes to threats on his life either. He posted to Truth Social, quote, 1,000 missiles are locked and loaded. Should the Iranian government act on its threat? Tensions, as you know, are undoubtedly high, Matt. How do you think these potential assassination plots impact Trump and any hope of solving this conflict diplomatically? We know the memorandum of understanding is now done. It's gone.
Iran is just clueless when it comes to American sensibility here. I mean, look, we just went through a week of burying Khomeini, the father of the current leader, who was killed during the initial part of the war. And there was, death to Trump, death to America, death to Israel. The Iranians had been doing this since they took power in the late 70s, early 80s. And we have to believe them when they say that they would do this. So, again, if they're foolish enough to attempt to strike out at the American president, it's certainly not going to end well for them, but it gets a rise out of their population at home. And they're using this threat of killing Donald Trump to keep the population in line domestically. It just makes me sad that, Iran is a beautiful country. Unfortunately, they just have really, really bad leaders they like being the outlaws and the outcasts in the world. And right now, their military is paying for it. Unfortunately, it's probably going to end up that a lot of their civilian infrastructure is going to get hit before they come back to the table.
And the Iranian people have already gone through so much under the atrocities of this current regime. Matt, President also added, quote, the U.S. military is ready to completely decimate and destroy all areas of Iran. Praise be to Allah. Was that necessary? And right now, with the president saying the ceasefire is over, what comes next?
Yeah, I mean, look, Donald Trump, if Donald Trump's tweets or social media content were measured on is it necessary, I think that it would be a pretty broad exemption for him to say whatever he wants. In terms of the sitting back down at the negotiating table, I think they can do what has been done for centuries beforehand. They can continue to negotiate, but the U.S., we would be foolish if we stopped attacking Iran. It's the only thing that drives them back to the bargaining table. And every time they stop, they poke us in the eye again. We need to keep pounding them until they come to the table and something is set. And if they don't, then we need to go back. But again, I just think we have to continue this until they know they're beaten. Right now, the IRGC does not think that it is defeated.
And I think you made a good point. If they had a nuclear weapon, the situation would have been a lot worse. Now we figure out what the options are moving forward. Very scary indeed. Matt Klink, it's always good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
And you as well. And more.